The great hall of Valemore Palace had never been so full. Every elder, every pack leader, every noble family had gathered beneath the tall stone arches to witness the mating ceremony. Torches burned along the walls, and the air smelled of pine and old magic. At the center of it all stood Alpha King Draven Ashwood, tall and broad-shouldered, his eyes the color of a winter sky. Beside him stood Lyra Hale. She was small compared to the wolves around her, with soft brown hair and quiet eyes that always seemed to be searching for a way out of a room. She did not carry herself like someone who belonged in a palace. She belonged, instead, to the kitchens, where she had worked since she was a child, scrubbing pots and carrying firewood, because she had never once shifted into her wolf form. Not at 7, when most children shift for the first time. Not at 13, when the elders said it was just late. Not even now. At 22, when everyone had stopped pretending it might still happen. The elders called her wolfless. The nobles called her worse, though never to her face. And yet, when the mating ceremony began and the ancient bonfire roared to life in shades of blue and gold, it was Lyra's name that rose from the flames, tied forever to the Alpha Kings. A gasp swept through the hall. Draven's jaw tightened. He looked at Lyra as if she were a mistake the universe had made and expected him to fix. The bonfire did not lie, everyone knew that. But everyone also knew that an Alpha King needed a strong mate, someone who could stand beside him in battle, in politics, in the harsh life of ruling a kingdom of wolves. A woman with no wolf at all could not do any of those things. Draven turned to the crowd, his voice loud enough to fill every corner of the hall. "I reject this bond." The words landed like a blow. Lyra felt her whole body go still, as if the floor beneath her had cracked open, and she was falling through it without moving at all. Every eye in the room turned to her, waiting to see how she would break. She did not cry. She did not beg him to reconsider. She simply lowered her eyes, turned, and walked out of the hall with as much dignity as she could gather, though her hands trembled at her sides. Behind her, whispers followed like smoke. Life after the rejection ceremony changed quickly and completely. Lyra was moved from the modest servant's room she had shared with 2 other girls to a small chamber in the lowest wing of the palace, near the laundry rooms, where the walls were damp and the light barely reached. Nobles who once ignored her now smiled at her with cruelty hidden behind their teeth. Some called her the king's mistake, others didn't bother lowering their voices at all. Only one person treated her the same as before, old Marta, the palace healer, a woman with silver hair and hands roughened by decades of grinding herbs and setting broken bones. "Sit," Marta said one evening, pulling out a stool beside her work table. "You look like you haven't eaten a full meal in days." Lyra sat, mostly because her legs were too tired to argue. "I'm fine." "You are not fine. But you are alive, and that is something." Marta placed a bowl of warm broth in front of her. "Eat, then tell me what is really wrong, because I do not believe for one moment that a bonfire makes mistakes." Lyra wrapped her hands around the warm bowl. "The bonfire chose me. Not my wolf. I don't have one. I never have." Marta studied her for a long moment, the way she studied a wound before deciding how to treat it. "Tell me something. Do you remember anything from before you were 7? Anything at all from your early childhood?" Lyra frowned. She tried to think back, searching through years of memory, the way someone searches through a drawer for something lost. But there was nothing. No memories of running through the forest as most wolf children did before their first shift. No memories of her parents' faces, not clearly. Just a strange, foggy blankness, like a room with the lights turned off. "No," she admitted slowly. "Nothing before 7. Marta's eyes sharpened with interest, though she said nothing more that night. But from then on, she began visiting Lyra more often, asking small, careful questions, watching her the way a healer watches for symptoms of an illness not yet named. While Lyra tried to rebuild a quiet life in the palace's lower halls, something was wrong with Draven. At first, it was small things. A dull ache behind his ribs that came and went, trouble sleeping, a restlessness in his wolf that he could not explain, as if some deep, invisible thread inside him had been pulled too tight and was slowly fraying. Then the symptoms grew worse. His control during pack meetings slipped. His temper, usually steady and calm, snapped without warning. During one training session, His wolf surged forward without his permission, nearly injuring one of his own guards before he managed to force it back. He called for the palace physician, a stern old wolf named Bastian, who examined him with a frown that deepened by the minute. "Your Majesty," Bastian said carefully, "have you rejected a mate bond recently?" Draven's jaw tightened. "You already know the answer." "Then I must tell you something you will not want to hear." Bastian folded his hands. "A rejected bond does not simply disappear. It lingers, unhealed, like a wound left open. If the bond is not properly severed through the full ceremony before the Elder Council, it will continue to weaken you. Left too long, it could threaten your health, your control, even your hold on the throne." Draven's fists clenched at his sides. "Then we hold the severance ceremony. End it properly." "That is one option," Bastian said carefully. "The other is—" "There is no other option," Draven said, and the physician did not push further, though something in his expression suggested he had wanted to. News of the king's weakening condition did not stay secret for long. Word spread through the palace like fire through dry grass, and no one was more pleased to hear it than Beta Kale. Kale was ambitious, clever, and had wanted more power in Valemore for years. He gathered a small circle of allies among the nobles who resented Draven's rule, and together, they began to whisper a new story through the kingdom, that the Alpha King was cursed, weakened by a false mate the Bondfire had wrongly chosen, that perhaps the throne itself was unstable, that perhaps it was time for new leadership. Kale pushed hard for a formal severance ceremony to be held immediately, in front of the full Elder Council, arguing that only a public, undeniable end to the bond could restore confidence in the king's strength. Draven, weakened and desperate to end the strange illness plaguing him, agreed. The day of the ceremony arrived cold and clear. Every elder from every corner of the kingdom filled the great hall once more, along with nobles, pack leaders, and curious commoners who had heard the rumors and wanted to see for themselves. Lyra was brought before them, dressed simply, her chin lifted despite the fear coiling in her stomach. She had known this day might come. She had told herself she was ready for it. She was wrong. Kale stood near the front of the gathered elders, a thin smile on his face as he addressed the crowd. "We are here to witness the true severance of a false bond," he announced, his voice carrying easily through the silent hall. "A bond that should never have existed, between our king and a woman with no wolf at all." He turned to Lyra, his eyes cold. "Tell them, girl. Tell the Elder Council what you are. Nothing. Wolfless. Worthless. A mistake the Bondfire made, and now must correct." The words struck harder than they should have, given how many times she had heard similar things before. Maybe it was the sheer number of eyes on her. Maybe it was standing in the same hall where she had first been rejected. Maybe it was simply that she was tired. Tired of being small. Tired of being nothing. Tired of swallowing every insult without answering back. Something inside her, buried so deep she had never even known it was there, finally broke free. A heat spread through her chest, sudden and overwhelming, like a fire catching after years of smoldering unseen. Her vision blurred, her bones ached in a way she had never felt before. She heard gasps around her, distant and strange, as if from underwater. And then, for the first time in her life, Lyra Hale shifted. It did not happen slowly, the way it did for most wolves. It happened all at once, a rush of transformation so powerful it knocked the nearest elders back a step. When it was finished, standing where Lyra had been was a wolf unlike any the kingdom had seen in generations. Massive, with fur the color of moonlight, and markings along her shoulders that shimmered faintly like silver ink. The great hall fell utterly silent. An old elder near the front, a woman named Ysolde who had served the council for over 60 years, sank slowly to her knees. "Lunar blood," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It cannot be. That bloodline died out generations ago." But there was no denying what stood before them. One by one, the elders began to kneel, their earlier judgment crumbling into shocked silence. Kale's smug expression collapsed into something closer to panic. His entire plan had depended on Lyra being weak, on the king's mate being nothing. He had no plan for this. Draven stood frozen at the front of the hall, staring at the wolf before him, at the mate he had rejected, humiliated, and cast aside, now revealed as something rarer and more powerful than any wolf in Valemore, including himself. Shame settled over him like a heavy weight. He had judged her before he had ever truly known her. He had let the kingdom's prejudice about weakness and strength blind him to the truth standing right in front of him. Slowly, Lyra shifted back, kneeling on the cold stone floor, breathing hard, her hands trembling from the aftershock of a transformation 22 years in the making. Chaol tried to speak, tried to salvage some piece of his plan, but the elders were no longer listening to him. No one challenges a lunar blood wolf. No one dared question her place now. Draven crossed the hall slowly, and for the first time in his life, an Alpha King knelt before someone else in front of his entire court. "I was wrong," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. "I judged you before I understood you. I let fear and pride speak louder than truth. I have no right to ask for anything from you. But I am asking anyway. Let me earn back what I threw away." Lyra looked at him for a long moment. The old Lyra, the one from the kitchens, might have accepted immediately, grateful for any scrap of acceptance. But she was not that woman anymore, not fully. Something had changed in her, awakened alongside her wolf. "You will not simply have me back because my wolf finally showed itself," she said quietly, though her voice carried through the silent hall. "If you want this bond, you will have to prove yourself worthy of it. Not as my king, as my equal." Draven bowed his head. "Then I will prove it. However long it takes." In the weeks that followed, Draven did exactly that. He stripped away much of the formal distance between them, insisting on standing beside her rather than above her in council meetings, defending her position among the pack leaders, and publicly acknowledging the mistake he had made. Old Marta, delighted and quietly triumphant, helped Lyra learn to control her newly awakened wolf, guiding her through the training most wolves received as children. Chaol's small rebellion collapsed entirely once the elders threw their support behind Lyra, and he was quietly removed from his position. His ambitions ended before they had truly begun. Months later, when Lyra was formally crowned Luna Queen beside Draven, the Great Hall was full once again. But this time, there was no humiliation, no rejection, no whispered cruelty. Only respect, earned rather than assumed, for a woman who had once been called nothing and had become, in truth, one of the most powerful wolves the kingdom had ever known. Lyra ruled not because a bonfire had chosen her, and not because Draven had finally accepted her. She ruled because she had proven, in front of every elder in the kingdom, exactly who she truly was.